Trump says he's saving America. But who's he really saving? Donald Trump just held a roundtable at the White House, and once again, he's turning a press event into a political performance. The cameras were rolling, the flags were waving, and Trump sat at the head of the table, surrounded by loyalists and far-right media. He called it a meeting on Homeland Security task forces, but make no mistake, this wasn't about safety. This was about power, optics, and fear. Because when Trump talks about cartels and invasions, he's not just talking about drug lords. He's talking about immigrants, about scapegoats, about creating enemies he can crush to look like a savior. Trump opened the roundtable by bragging. Of course, he called it a sweeping, unprecedented, and historically successful operation. He said his administration has arrested over 3,000 cartel members, seized tons of drugs, and confiscated guns. Sounds impressive, until you realize what he's really doing. He's weaponizing law enforcement as a campaign prop. He's turning public safety into political theater. Because in Trump's world, everything is about him. Every crisis, every tragedy, every so-called success, it all feeds the myth of Trump the strongman, and the people sitting around him. They weren't career law enforcement officials giving neutral briefings. They were hand-picked loyalists. Stephen Miller, Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, a lineup that looks less like a task force and more like a reunion of Fox News commentators and MAGA influencers. These are not the faces of a bipartisan security effort. These are the architects of Trump's America First agenda, a movement built on fear, division, and control. Trump's executive order, signed on day one of his return to office, is called Protecting the American People from Invasion. Think about that word, invasion. It's the same rhetoric that fueled January 6th, the same language used by white nationalists who claim immigrants are replacing Americans. It's the same dehumanizing narrative that has led to violence in cities across this country. Trump knows exactly what he's doing when he uses words like invasion. He's not protecting America. He's priming it for conflict. He compared cartels to ISIS, a chilling parallel meant to stoke panic. They're cutting off heads, he said, burning people alive. Then, like clockwork, he pivoted to Joe Biden, accusing him of surrendering the country to chaos. Classic Trump. Fear, blame, and projection. Because if we're talking about surrendering America to violence and corruption, Trump doesn't have to look across the border. He can look in the mirror. He says he inherited a disgrace, but what he inherited was a democracy still standing after he tried to burn it down. What he inherited was a justice system he's been attacking since day one, and now he's trying to rebuild that system in his own image, replacing independent officials with political loyalists, turning intelligence agencies into instruments of personal vengeance, and framing every law enforcement action as proof of his strength. That's not leadership. That's authoritarianism, dressed up as patriotism. The roundtable wasn't really about crime. It was about control. Trump wants Americans to believe that the nation is under siege, that only he can stop the chaos. It's a story straight out of the autocrat's playbook. Create a crisis, declare yourself the only solution, and demand loyalty in return. That's what he's doing now. Because when Trump talks about the cartels, he's not just talking about criminals, he's building a political narrative. A myth of the strong leader who saves the nation from monsters. And yet behind all the tough talk, the facts tell a different story. Yes, the task forces made arrests, but the majority of cartel operations have existed for decades, crossing borders, corrupting officials, and laundering billions. No single roundtable or executive order can fix that overnight. Real solutions require coordination, intelligence sharing, and justice, not campaign slogans. But that's not what Trump's after. He's after headlines. He's after applause. He's after fear. This roundtable came as the U.S. military carried out airstrikes on suspected drug vessels in the Caribbean and the Pacific. An extraordinary escalation. Think about that. Military strikes ordered inside foreign waters, justified by national security. Trump is now using the Pentagon to project the illusion of strength, while claiming the moral high ground of fighting evil. But who defines evil in Trump's America? Because this is the same man who praised dictators, mocked war heroes, and called fallen soldiers suckers and losers. When he talks about protecting America, he's talking about protecting his version of it, a version that punishes dissent, silences critics, and targets the vulnerable. And the media outlets covering this? Fox News Digital called the operation a landmark achievement. Of course they did, because this is propaganda, slick, polished, and packaged for prime time. The real question is, who's holding Trump accountable? Who's asking where these arrests lead? What rights were violated? What transparency exists in these task forces? When fear replaces facts, democracy doesn't stand a chance. Let's be clear, America does face a crisis: fentanyl, trafficking, organized crime. But real leadership tackles those problems through justice, compassion, and coordination, not through performative militarism. Trump's Roundtable wasn't about ending violence. It was about harnessing it, weaponizing it, using it to justify his next move. Because when Trump says, "We won't stop until the threat is eradicated," what he means is, we won't stop until total control is achieved. This is why we can't tune out. Every photo op, every speech, every so-called security initiative is part of a larger strategy: to condition Americans to accept force over freedom, to blur the line between law enforcement and political enforcement, to make authoritarianism look like safety. And history has shown what happens when we fall for that lie. So the next time you hear Trump brag about saving America, remember this: true patriotism isn't blind obedience. It's accountability. It's asking hard questions. It's standing up when power goes unchecked. Because the real threat to America isn't coming from the cartels. It's coming from within. From those who exploit fear to gain control. From those who divide us to keep us weak. They say they're protecting the homeland. But what they're really protecting is their power. They call it security. We call it manipulation. They frame it as strength. We see it for what it is: another performance in the never-ending show called Trumpism, where every crisis is an opportunity and every solution comes with a cost. But here's the good news: we see it now. We're not fooled by the stagecraft or the slogans. We know that safety and justice can't come from corruption and cruelty, and we know that the only way to defend democracy is to fight for it. Because truth still matters, accountability still matters, and no amount of roundtables or executive orders can erase the fact that Donald Trump's greatest threat to America isn't the enemy abroad. It's the authoritarian impulse he brings home. They lied, they posed, they staged a performance of power, but we saw it, we heard it, and we're not backing down. Not now, not ever. Call to action, stay informed, stay loud, stay united, because democracy doesn't defend itself. We do.